Well, good morning. It's good to see you guys. Welcome to the Daily Dose today. You know, if you've been kind of walking through these over the last couple of weeks, you've probably realized that the portion of the scripture that I gravitate to a good bit is the book of Philippians. And there's so much in that letter that Paul wrote to the church in Philippi that speaks to me, that I identify with, and just some really powerful statements, some imagery there. You know, last week we talked about the surpassing value of knowing Jesus and to knowing him in the power of his resurrection and also in the fellowship of his sufferings. And so all the way through, it's just one of those parts of the scripture, the portions of the scripture that really speak to me. And I don't know about you when you think about your life, but what are some of the best moments? And I'm talking about a feeling. It feels good to win, doesn't it? It feels good to be victorious, whether that's you or your favorite team. Being able to just relax, and to be at a place of ease. We have in our family, we have two types of vacations. We have the really active vacation where every day we're hiking, we're doing something. And then we have the other vacation, which is my favorite, is just the take it easy vacation. That's the beach vacation. That's where, you just wake up in the morning and you go about your day and you maybe have a couple of things that you're going to do, but there's plenty of time kind of cut out for just kind of relaxing and taking it easy and sitting on the beach and watching the water. And so, those kind of things. But for me, some of the best feelings I've ever had in my life was when I have just been spent. When I've given the last possible ounce of energy to something, whether it's a hike, and I'm just spent. And at the end of that, I'll just kind of sit down, take a deep breath, and I'll kind of revel in, I am just completely, finished here. I'm completely drained. But the accomplishment or whatever it was I was engaged in physically just kind of washes over me. And in that moment of weakness, there's this great sense that whatever was inside of me, whatever I was capable of, it's all been pushed out. Intellectually, we do that, whether it's a course that that you were in, whether it's a paper that you had to write, whether it was the expectation for an exam that you were going to have to take, and you put everything you could into that moment. And at the end, there's a sense of, hey, I did it, I was successful, I got a good grade, I got a great response in my paper. But it was that idea that, boy, you put everything you had into that, intellectually and mentally. In Philippians, Paul talks about that, and he talks about that in chapter 2, he first talks about encouraging him to be lights, to show God to the people, to the people around them, and he goes on with that kind of description until he says this in verse 17 of chapter 2. He says, "Your faith in the Lord and your service are like a sacrifice offered to him." And then he speaks to himself and he says, "And my own blood may have to be poured out with the sacrifice if this happens." Like, whatever I give, I'm going to give everything I have to God. I remember when I went to mission trips several times to Indonesia, to the city of Surabaya. And I would go over there and work with college students. And it was a long day, and it was a long 2 weeks. We were there for 2 weeks, and we would travel around during the day, meeting with people and speaking at churches. And then I would do a retreat for a college, and then I would speak someplace later that night, at a church. Sometimes it was in a church. A lot of times it was just in a house. And so we'd be going all day. And we do this for 2 weeks straight. And I remember the last night was in a hotel in Surabaya, and I'm just exhausted. I haven't been eating the way that I normally do. just because, Indonesian food, it wasn't something I was used to. Actually lived on Dairy Queen dip cones for 2 weeks. But I remember falling back into the chair that night in the hotel room, just exhausted, but I had the most incredible sense of satisfaction that, and physically I was spent, but it had been a great 2 weeks. I'd really, in a way, had given everything I had to give emotionally, what requires from teaching and preaching. And I just fell back in my chair and I looked out the window kind of over this city, and I had the greatest sense of satisfaction because I knew that I had been faithful for those 2 weeks, and I had done everything that I could within my own abilities and my own dependence and reliance upon God. And it was just this sense that we had this mission for 2 weeks and it was coming to an end. And it was there the first time I had this thought and this idea of Paul, that his being a sacrifice and just being poured out for his mission and what he was doing. It was the first time I had this thought of, and what do I want my life to be? At the end of everything, when my life is over, what do I want to think? And this is what I came up with, that there were 3 things. I wanted to love God. I wanted to show him and to lead other people to him. And those are obvious, right? But here was the last one, which was a new thought for me then. And I want to leave this life on empty. I don't want to have all this stuff left over of things you could have done or should have done, or I don't want to, I don't want to get to the end and know that, I could have put more into this. I want to have that feeling of being spent and drained. Now, I'm not looking forward to, that day, but just whenever that time happens for me, I guess it comes back to the whole idea of regret, that I want to be able to say, like Paul, that I was a sacrifice that was offered, I was poured out, I was on empty, that whatever I was capable of for you, God, I did my best to do that. And I don't want to have all of these things that could have or might have happened. And so as you go through this next week or these next days, think about that. Where is it that you could say, I've got something to give here. There's something I can do here, whether it is sharing a verbal, testimony or story of who Christ is in your life for someone who's seeking that, whether it's, particularly in these days and times, being there for someone and offering help or service to somebody, or just seeing something and being able to step in there, to leave this life on empty, to not think that there's more that could have been done. It could have been more. Now, will I have those thoughts? I think I will, because we all do. I'm not going to have completed every single thing that I ever thought I could do, but and just like that night in Indonesia, if it required, I could have gotten up and I could have gone to another church, I could have gone to another meeting, I could have preached another message, I could have shared more. But at that night, I thought, boy, I have taken full advantage of this opportunity. And for you to think, I've taken full advantage of this life. And there's no big gaping hole out there of something that could have been a part of my life and my service to Christ that isn't. So over these next few weeks, maybe you think like that. And you think, okay, how is it that I can spend time and giving my life to God so I don't get to that point? And some point, maybe over the next, little while, you can sit down and you can fall into a chair, or you can fall into your bed at night, or you can be sitting in your car and you can have that sense of satisfaction that I did what I was asked or required to do. And sure, it was draining, sure, it was tough, but it was good. And to have that feeling of, I'm pretty close to empty today, and then collectively do that day after day. All right, so you guys have a great day. Serve the Lord. Find any way you can to make a difference and to shine His light through you. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye, everyone.